we should talk all about that with Adam today. How to hit a shank, because everybody wants to know how to do that. Everyone.
That is a challenge. You've got the hitting bay right now. Can you go hit a shank right now? I'm kind of not
Probably
kidding.
not. No, I don't think so.
You can't hit a
really
shank
try.
on demand?
I don't know.
Come on. I could, but I won't. I've got windows. This is my top floor room, so
You guys keep going. I'm gonna go try this.
Oh, this is gonna be great, Adam.
I want evidence.
So we're talking about shanks for a reason, Adam, and hitting them on demand, because moving the location of where you strike a golf ball around on a golf club is a skill, right? It's not something that every golfer has, is the ability to know if they're hitting it in the center or the toe, the heel. Tell us a little bit about that concept of the skill of being able to, strike the face where you want it to.
Yeah, there's the awareness part of it. For a start, most people aren't aware of what they're doing. But yeah, the skill, or how I define skill, is the ability to make reality or outcome as desired. I mean, that's been specifically worded like that. It's one of those things that sounds too obvious when you say it, just the ability to make reality and outcome as desired. There's so much that goes into that. Things like perception, action coupling, or intention, action coupling. So a huge part of it is intention, without going in too many different definitions. If I intend to hit the heel, I will hit the heel, or at the very least, I will move the pattern more towards the heel. And vice versa. If I intend to hit the toe, it will move more towards the toe. So obviously I have something that allows me to do that. Just by thinking about it, I can affect a change in the outcome. Just like if I want to present the face a few more degrees open or closed, I can do that. And I suppose how you define skill or quantify it more is
how do we do?
It took me 3 tries. I hit those first 2 really good.
So there you are, right? So that would be a good way of defining skill. How many attempts does it take you to achieve what you want? So for me, I'm higher skilled than Nick, because if he asked me to shank it, I could do it in the very first attempt, and I could toe it on the very first attempt. And I suppose with things like TrackMan and GC Quad, you could ask someone to say, present the face 3 degrees open, and you could see how many attempts it takes them to get that, or to get within a window, either 1 degree either side of that. And so when you ask, if you took 100 random golfers on the range and asked them to intentionally hit more towards the toe, I have to word that correctly there, but more towards the toe, many players just wouldn't be able to do it at all. They'd stand there it might take 100 attempts before they do it. So you'd say, okay, well, that player is low skilled at that specific skill. They don't have a lot of skill in the ability to move the strike around the face. Now, that's fine. If that player is hitting it on the center for the day, that's absolutely fine, because it's like that player doesn't need to move it around. But the problem comes is what happens when that player has a bad pattern on the day. They wake up, they've rushed to the cart, or it happened to me the other day. I went to the range. I've been in quarantine for a while. First couple of shots were out of the toe, where I instantly calibrated it because I have that skill. Unfortunately, if amateurs haven't practiced or trained the ability to do that, they'd have to go on the course with that toe shot for the day. And that's where it's like, those amateurs are warming up and they're like, oh man, I'm just not hitting it well today. Or that first shot of the day is horrible. It's a shank. And that guy goes, it's round over. Whereas if they had the ability, the skill, they wouldn't be round over. They'd be able to either calibrate it through the round, or very next shot, they'd be able to change it. So, yeah.
So I guess in a way you're talking about, so I guess you're talking specifically practicing a skill like that if you're not interested in taking lessons or refining your form to learn how to repeatably hit the middle of this thing. Was that more or less the genesis? You've got your choices, really. I guess I'm saying, Adam, you can learn how to just hit it here and try to do that over and over and over, which I'm fine with. Or if you're just going to take golf instruction into your own hands, practicing hitting it all over the face and understanding those skills can then help you problem solve on the course. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that, and this, sorry about that, Mo, but I push the idea of skill development. And I suppose I come across as anti-mechanical a lot of the times. I'm really not. I'm a Ledbetter instructor, and I will give as mechanical a lesson as the next person if I feel it necessary. I think they actually combine quite well together. Because say, for example, in my own game, if I'm making a change to my swing, if I want to do something wild in the swing and copy Matt Wolf to try and feel it, the first few I might toe it or shank it. But then I can quickly use that skill to recalibrate it. So I can then make a huge swing change and recalibrate the result to what I want very quickly. So I think it works really well. If you have these skills, it allows you to make macro swing changes better as well and get it all coming together. I think the point that I'm constantly making is that macro changes to the swing are great and they affect the patterns of shot, but they don't necessarily create the result, because we know it's that minutiae impact that creates the result. You know, whether the face is a couple of degrees open or closed, whether the strike is out of the center or out of the heel, or, you know, even the arc depth. If you drop down half an inch, you can hit 6 inches behind it. So it's these minutiae that control the result. I like to see a balance of both. I'm trying to hit it from both sides, improve the player's skills, or I say their ability to drive the car, whilst at the same time improving the car, you know, improving the macro movements, the technique. So, and I think the combination of that is very powerful. And I think in the industry, we only really focus on the car, the movements, the macro movements we see on camera.
So how much, what percentage of your students do you think you give the exercise we just talked about learning to hit shots on the toe or the heel as a prescription to?
Oh, I would give it to pretty much everybody. Yeah, I don't think there's a student that I haven't given some form of that exercise to. If it's a better player, it might be a much less extreme form. It might be just hit it a couple of millimeters out of the toe, a couple of millimeters out of the heel, something like that. But I just want to see that they have that ability. And obviously, when you get into better players as well, lots of them have that already. You ask a better player, can you hit out the heel? They kind of look at you strange as if, well, of course I can do that if I want to. It's like, well, okay, I just need to see that you can to show me that you have that skill. But yeah, to answer your question, I want to see that everybody has some level of control over that, because I personally believe that that is going to be the biggest long-term benefit for that player. That once these players develop these basic skills, they have the ability to self-coach. They have the ability to correct themselves on the course without the need for a camera or a pro to see them. And like I said, it helps when it comes to making changes to their swing. So there's 3 big benefits to that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this stuff, Nick. And I kind of like, personally, I like stacking on things like balance and tempo and like doing other kind of skill-based training like that, like tempo, like hitting some shots at 50%, 110%, kind of getting a gauge so you kind of know where you are a little bit, or whether it's, you know, balance, hitting off one leg, or switching those things up. I've found a lot of benefit and seen benefit from folks that work on some of the skill stuff, some of those things where you might not know your tempo on the day, but you know, you think back to some of these checks that you do or tests that you do, like, all right, what does 50% feel like? What does this feel like? And kind of maybe gauge where you're at. Nick, what are you, I love kind of your perspective on this, and hearing what you think about this kind of stuff.
Well, I'd probably say there are hundreds and thousands of ways to probably teach people to play golf. So I wouldn't say there's that I'm certainly about to say the only way to do it. I just wonder how valuable those skills really are. And not the ones you're describing, Adam, of how to just go practice that, especially if you're on your own and you don't want to get any golf instruction advice, then learning how to hit a shot here, but still hit it straight is certainly pretty valuable, or the same thing on a heel strike for sure. I wonder though, like hitting a shot off of just one foot, how valuable really is that as a skill? Because I'm never going to go out and hit a golf ball that way. I spend most of my time teaching people.
Personally, I don't teach those. Yeah, I don't teach those skills.
So Cordy's just making that up with all of his students. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Or even like hitting a driver 50% is a good way to practice a particular feel, or
Not
what you're
really.
describing as how to drive your car different, perhaps.
Oh, no, not really. Not really.
No, you don't
It
like
could
that?
be part of it. I would
Yeah,
say that kind of stuff, I'd probably make 5%, 3% of the overall plan. It's like I said, when it becomes non-contextual, like hitting off one leg,
sure.
hitting one arm, things like that, there are probably very specific reasons to use those drills.
Yeah.
And I do think they might have good value. You know, as kids, we played around all the time, and you know, you figure new things out. And I think there is value in say, all right, let's hit the ground in this place. Once you're really good at it, and you can hit that spot every time, it's like, okay, let's find some unique ways of doing it then. You know, I practiced a lot of trick shots so I could demonstrate more things. And I did find value in it, you know, doing things like lifting the club over my head or even gripping it really weird. Like I said, it's not, those type of things are not things that I prescribe to people. It's more very specific skills. So I would say the core skills are hitting the ground wherever you want to,
Hmm.
or say the ability to move the ground strike around, forward and back, up and down, in and out as well, which would relate to the toe and heel strike.
Right.
And then presenting the face more open or closed at impact. Those are the core skills for me. And then some other ones would be, you know, can you change the path that the club is coming in as well? So yeah, they're basically impact skills, right? The 7 impact
Yeah.
laws.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be like the simplest way. So while we sometimes, you and I might describe our approaches to golf similarly in a lot of cases, but different in some ways, I'm
Mhm.
really basically teaching everybody to hit the ground in the right spot, have the face close to the path, the face open to the target, but by 50% of the swing direction, and keep the angle of attack pretty close to the tour average or slightly less, and swing as fast as you can while being able to do those. And I teach
Yep.
everybody
Yep.
to do basically the same thing,
Hmm. And I
which
always say
sounds
the
like you're,
crossover between skill and technique as well. They're basically the same thing. I mean, any change that you make is always going to be a technical one, right? Even if you
Mhm.
change someone's mental, so, you know, someone's a complete head case on the course and you calm them down. Well, you've basically changed their technique, right? You've changed how
Yeah,
their
yeah.
club is being delivered. Or even
Mhm.
if you change someone's strategy, you basically change their path and their face orientation relative to the targets. Every change is a technical one.
Yeah, I think that's
I
great,
think
and that comes up once in a while of the psychology of how to play, and when pressure's on, what do you do? And I usually just talk about it as the pressure's on, and then it changes your swing form, and suddenly you get a different result. It had nothing to do with the pressure itself. Your swing changed. You did something
yeah.
different. You hit the ball in a different part of the club, something
Mm.
like that.
And then
Getting to
you've got,
your 7 swing laws. So is the first, what's the first skill you generally teach someone? So someone comes to you, they shoot 95, they want to break 80. They struggle with contact on the face XY, and the low point isn't right. They slice every shot, face is open to the target and the path, but open to the target 4 or 5 degrees. Where do you start with someone who's got a host of problems?
I suppose you have to go with the biggest one at the time, but I like to generally, if you were to give me 100 beginner golfers, it would probably be ground contact.
Okay.
And I'd actually lump face strike and ground contact into one thing. Because I mean, even ground contact is 2 things, right? There's a low point position and
Right.
there's the arc depth, there's the up and down movement.
Right.
But if I say, right, contact the ground here, and one of the drills I use is I get an old club, I get on a piece of concrete, or I used to get on a piece of concrete, and put a little bit of marker pen on it, and I'd make a swing and chip the concrete. And I would
Yeah.
show them that, oh, look, I can hit this spot every time, or within a quarter of an inch of it every time. And I give them the club, and even if you give a 15 handicap at a club, they hit it this far behind, and then they would have, you know, laterally, they'd either hit closer to their feet or farther from their feet, which represents a toe or heel strike.
Right.
So when you get that player to hit that spot, it basically self-organizes the up and down movement, the front to back movement, and the side to side movement with one thought process. So they're only focusing on that external thing of kind of hit this spot, and all of the mechanics are kind of changing, not always in the right way. And you know, we discussed this in the last podcast, Cordy. So yeah, there can be negative self-organization as well. I think I'm a little bit more lenient as an instructor initially. I'm kind of like, well, just get this task done. Because once you get this task done, that ball's doing what you want it to do. Then we can start to work on the method employed a little bit more later. Because with a beginner, you want them to see success. Once they're hitting that spot, they're getting the ball up in the air. Now you can start to go on, well, let's present the face more open or closed. And, even with a complete beginner, I can get them to close the face 45 degrees at address and grip it, and then hit it left, and then reverse it. And again, it's not necessarily the right way. That player might leave their first lesson looking a little bit funky. But I tell you what, they can hit that ball long and straight now, and they can hit it up in the air, and they know what to do. I can take them down a road later that makes them look more tour pro-esque. But now that at least like I said, they're getting the ball to do what they want, and they're understanding what they need to do to get that ball to do what they want, which is a huge thing that I see a lot of players don't have those two skills, those two mental.
Yeah, it sounds like a great place to start. What you're really trying to say, I might just say it different, would be that you're actually practicing with students how to, you're practicing the path of their club, the 3D path. So the vertical and the horizontal. We usually separate those, but you're teaching them how to swing the 3D path of the club in a way that will make the shot work. That's what I basically tell people I start with. You teach you how to hit the ground in the right spot, but have the angle of attack still be the tour average or slightly less, so that you're not having a problem with that the Y variable on the club face. You're not having the high or low shots on there.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So what do you do to do you dabble much in the 3D world? I mean, that's basically where I spend my whole day.
I've looked at a lot of stuff on it. I've jumped on KVS, things like that. So I'm not 3D dumb. I've had the software of gears as well. I explore it. I do like it. But yeah, it's not. I'll be honest, that's not something I teach with.
Yeah, and that's okay. I'm certainly not judgmental on that part. More of it leads to the question of when someone has a low point issue of they hit behind the ball too frequently. So maybe the angle of attack is inconsistent, or it's down enough but not too much. It's close to your tour average, 4 or 5 degrees with an iron. What variable in the 3D world do you find yourself changing the most to try to move that low point up?
In the body world, it could be for low point position. It could be release, earlier or later release.
Can you define release for me? I don't know.
I suppose how I'm thinking of it is when in the 3D world where that club would pass the lead forearm.
Okay.
So, where it reached 12 o'clock, I suppose. But I'm thinking more 3D in that, because I'm also considering the next variable, which is swing direction. All else being equal, if someone swings more left, the low point moves more left, and vice versa. And weight shift. So those are 3 big variables I'm looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so even sway, left wrist extension, or lead wrist extension.
Yeah, exactly. If someone has a stronger grip, it might be more ulnar radial deviation.
Okay.
But of those things. So those are the 3 big ones that will affect low point for me. And then the other part, once the low point is in the right position, once it's like 2 to 4 inches in front or so, then you're looking at arc depth control. That becomes the dominant skill.
Okay, take me through how you help somebody. You just said control the rate you move your wrist towards ulnar, the left wrist extension. You've got the sways, whether it's shoulder, pelvic, thoracic, rib cage, if you want to use the gears term. Then when your angle of attack is too downward, what do you do to help someone lessen that blow?
I think you're fully engaged. Before we started, you're like, "Hey, Cordy, I think you might need to ask some questions here today." I think you're fully locked in and dialed, Nick.
That's right. This is what I get to do. Fortunately, with the 700 to 850 coaches that we have, is just kind of talk your way through how you're teaching golf.
I'm gonna go get a coffee. I'll see you guys in like 10.
All right. No, you did a great job though, Cordy.
Okay, thanks,
really
guys.
Good for you today. Might be your best show ever.
Carry on.
So it's a great question. So you're saying once you get that low point too far in front, or say the angle attack is too steep. I mean, you could reverse that. You could reverse like the weight shift, so less weight shift, Earlier release, even, you know, if someone hits it really low, earlier release might add some loft and move the low point back a little bit. Could be fine. Or swing direction, you know, typically I see a lot of golfers who swing it left. They have this steep angle of attack. So, you know, low point and angle of attack are tied in. So you might want to change swing direction with that player. Once all those other parameters are pretty decent, they're probably playing good dynamic loft, swing direction's pretty good, face angle is good. I'd work on the extension up. So that's one of the few cases where I would go quite technical. So I talk about the body working up. I usually will say something like get the head moving up, but really we're talking about that left shoulder working up. I just find people connect more to the head concept or the chest. You know, you could pick any part really. But even that you can turn into an external focus in terms of the science. You know, you could say, right, imagine there's a glass ceiling above your head and you're just smashing through it through impact, you know, as the club reaches about you know, last parallel, something like that. So there's still a technical focus. Oh, you guys there? Yep. No.
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry. My screen changed over. So still a technical focus. It's just actually in the science that's still classed as external though. So I think there's a misconception in the motor learning, or people kind of learning about motor learning, that external always has to be a task focus. No, you can have, you know, if you stick an alignment stick through your belt loops and start focusing on your hip turn with an alignment stick, you just made it external because they're focusing on the alignment stick now. So I like to separate more into task focuses versus movement focuses as well. I'll use all of them. Like I said, I'll use all of them.
And I appreciate your viewpoint of use all sorts of different methods, and basically you're always doing something external, even though it doesn't feel that way. I probably get pigeonholed the same way, and I do it myself, of talking about all the technique. Like we'll get into this picture in just a second, but half of my golf lessons are just turn a little bit more in the backswing, or angle yourself towards the ground, or here's this pool noodle down here, just don't hit it. So they're similar in methodology that way. This was, you made me think about the follow through piece and what you were describing as the extension or the bending backward. This is really a chart basically showing, I think this is 80 or 90,000 people. And it's kind of designed like a radar map would be whenever you watch the weather. So first, whenever you see blue, basically no one is up here. I'll get to what the X and Y means in just a second. No one does this. Where you see the darkest red, that's where the most people are on this chart. So the chart itself is skill level, +4 handicaps all the way to the ranked beginners. And then when their right humerus is 45 degrees past horizontal in the follow through, the amount of backward thoracic bend you have. So we measure that with the sensor that you can see on my buddy John here, and the angle of that. So bent forward like this would be the top of the graph, and bent backward, like John's demonstrating, is lower on the graph. And you can see a skill correlation very quickly between the worst players, who are up here and higher on the chart, all the way down to the better golfers who are lower on the chart. So they're bent backwards more, like you see John here. But then as you start getting into being able to measure a lot of different people, you can start seeing the patterns exist on so many of these variables. Like basically half of probably the 96 that I'm measuring at this point in time show up and have a severely tight correlation or a repeatability in that measurement. They all basically use the same system on how to move. And at that point in time, somewhere between 20 to 30 back is where you see the best players. And then you mentioned the low point control of a bad golfer. They might get the ground part right, but then they don't have the backward bending or extension piece done very well. So they have a much more downward angle attack, can't swing as fast, and then that makes it very challenging to keep your 3D swing direction far enough into out. So this is like one of the first things I probably teach people is how to hit how to have a 3D path that's far enough up and is close to the middle of the face. And then I deal very quickly with this skill, which is how to raise the butt end of the club very quickly once it gets close to parallel to the ground, and keep the butt end of the club from lowering. It's got to start to rise faster. So as your wrist move from the radial towards ulnar and your legs start to straighten, they've got a chance of shallowing out the angle of attack. And we just did a whole show about this the other day, Cordy. I think it was maybe Wednesday last week, so people can watch that. Sounds like you're doing the same thing. You really have the same system. I just like hearing you describe it in a walk yourself through how start with a low point, getting it far enough forward, then shell out the hit. Then here's how data can really help back up your teaching solution.
Yeah, I like this stuff. I mean, one thing in the podcast, because the podcast that we did, Cordy, last time, it was only 30 minutes and I could probably talk for 20 hours on this topic. And I unfortunately didn't get to the point where I'm doing the case for technique stuff. And the case for technique stuff is stuff like what you just said. What are the tight correlations? What are the things that all tour players exhibit? And they have very tight ranges around them, and they have a logical backing for why that is the case. And, you know, if players have that backward bend, well, it's logical because that means they're extending up through impact. Why does that help performance? Where it allows things like more normal force on the club, I think is the correct terminology. So more parametric acceleration. It also bends the arc of that club, the path. So it becomes, you know, what Chris Como and Sasha call a 3D flat spot. Which then opens up what I called in the practice manual book more. Yes, I got a plug in. More. Shit, I got the plug in so hard I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, you did great. You did great.
More mechanical
about how
consistency.
how level the iron or the driver is really traveling down at the bottom as much before.
Yeah, there's a lower rate of change in that arc at the bottom. So in terms of angle of attack, swing path, arc height, arc depth, there's a lower rate of change for a longer period of time. So that's what I call mechanical consistency. I think Chris calls it something else. I love Chris. Chris Como did an Instagram live on it, and he uses much better words than I do. He's much more eloquent.
I love Chris. He's great. He's done so much to help golf tech, and he's been a good friend over the years there too. So it's cool to hear him talk about something similar to what we are.
Yeah, and I've always loved that concept of, well, what things give us a bigger margin for error, because that would then require less skill. You know, say for example, if the low point is in front of the ball, then any up and down movement that you have will have less of an effect on ground contact. So let me put it this way. Right. This is quite hard to visualize. I do have blog posts on it, but you got two golfers. One guy has his low point 4 inches in front, like a pro. The other golfer has his low point 1 inch behind the golf ball. Right. Now, both guys make 100 swings, and they move up, and they have an up and down variance, right? Because we're natural, we're humans. We have an up and down variance of 1/2 inch. Well, a guy who has his low point 1 inch behind the ball is going to have horrendous results. Yeah. Whereas the guy who has a low point in front of the ball is still going to be able to contact that ground relatively well, and the outcomes are going to be better. So even though there's the same biological variance up and down from player to player, the outcome variance is lower. And so that's what I would call mechanical consistency, when the outcome variance is lower for any given biological variance. And then you could say biological consistency is, well, how consistent is the person up and down? You know, how consistent is their movement pattern effectively? And I'm always thinking about both and working on both. The interesting thing is, if you took a player with a low point behind it, and you give them something mechanical and move that low point in front, you could increase their mechanical consistency and reduce their biological consistency.
Yeah, depending on how you do it and depending on how they react relative to your instruction, that can all be very different. Exactly. That's why you need to be a good teacher.
Yeah.
So you can help reduce that and make it still keep the repeatability and the retest reliability very high.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Adam,
I like that picture. That was good.
Let's end on maybe what are some few games or few thoughts on, if someone, we've talked a little bit about, low point control here. What would be some games or ideas that people could go play around with, when they head to the range next?
To test your skills, I got some really basic tests that actually end up being good drills anyway. You could go into a bunker, draw a line, so flatten it with the rake so it's really, really smooth, draw a line in,
That might be tough. I don't know what we're using these days to flatten the.
Oh
flatten.
yeah. And then place a dot 5 inches in front of that line, 4 inches in front, 3 inches, 2, 1, and then do the same for behind as well. And then make a swing, try and hit 5 inches in front. Then make a swing and try and hit 5 inches behind, and hit all of those 10 different spots, or 11 spots if you include the 0. Hit all of those spots, and you can actually quantify how skilled a player is, because if I ask you to hit 5 inches in front and you do, I'd write down 0. Then if I ask you to hit 5 inches behind and you do, I'd write down 0. And so at the end of those 11 shots, the score represents how skilled you are. The better the skill is, the lower that score will be. Then for face strike, you could do the same thing as well. You could split the face into thirds, and try and hit different parts of the face. And again, hit the outside third, or even split it into fifths. That's what I do with players, and get them to go around the face twice, give them a score out of 10. For face direction, I tend to use TrackMan for this. So I'll set little windows, little boundaries. I'll say, all right, present the face 0 to 2 degrees right, then 2 to 4, then 4 to 6, and 6 to 8. And again, hitting all those different windows, see how many times they can do it. Or I'll just give them a specific number. I'll say like hit 5 degrees right, and I write down how off their number was. If they were trying to hit 5 degrees right, or 5 degrees open with a face, and they only hit 3 degrees open, I give them a score of 2. Again, the lower the score, the better they would be. So those are just some basic exercises. And I've got players who on TrackMan can present the face within a degree of, they can hit 10 degrees right to 10 degrees left, and hit it within a degree every time. And that's quite valuable. I know that from a player's perspective. If I'm on the course and I'm suffering with a left shot one day, I simply ask myself, what does it feel like to present the face 2 degrees open? And then I just play with that feeling for the day, and it neutralizes it. But I don't know. I don't have to know, like, did something change in my wrist flexion by 2 degrees? I'm thinking much more externally.
Most people don't understand just to use their understanding of the ball flight rules just to help them get around the golf course. So I think that's great advice. Out of your book there, let's plug your book again, because I know it's been popular amongst golf coaches for sure, the practice manual. What's your favorite chapter in that book?
I don't know. I haven't read it.
Fair enough. Cordy can't read, so.
You know what?
I won't ask him.
That's the honest truth, because I wrote it. I read it a couple of times before I published it. And then once I hit publish, I'm just like, I can't read it again, because every time I read it, I find a new typo in it or something like that. I mean, I want to add another 1,000 words to it, because I'll read it and I'm like,
it'll always be
that's
like
not that clear, and it's already 356 pages or 380.
That's going to be the trouble with writing a book, for sure. Every time I have a friend who would like to write a book. He's written hundreds of books, many of them about golf. Keep thinking I'm just going to wait a little while longer. I've got something up my sleeve, like these funny little graphs right here that we can make a book about. But every time you're going to go back and still look at it, if 5 years from now, would I still say it like that, or should I have done something a little different? It's tough to keep a written word viable like that. But kudos for getting it done. I think it's hard enough to write a book, let alone. Did you do most of that yourself?
I did all of it myself. The writing is the easy thing that comes to me. The not writing is harder, because, like I said, I'll read
getting it published.
1,000 words to
getting it published, getting it sold. Those are the tricky parts, for sure.
Yeah, like I said, I was very lucky with all that stuff. I don't know what, there's so many things that are outside your control. But yeah, I didn't expect to sell any of it. So the fact that people have bought it, it's my goal with it was just to write something that's a little bit unique, maybe add something to the industry, or maybe gets people to think of alternate ways. Like, I suppose the chapter that I like the most, whichever one it is on the difference between skill and technique, just thinking about difference. And I don't like to see it as skill versus technique. Sometimes I write those things just to get people to click or whatever, but it's really skill and technique. I think they're very different things. I think it's still not widely understood what is the difference between the two, but they tie in together as well. That's why it's hard to separate them. Change someone's skill, you're automatically changing their technique, and vice versa.
Cool. Well, Adam, thanks for hanging out. Nick, you asked some
Adam,
great
enjoy.
questions today. Good job.
Oh no, yeah, no. Thanks for talking some golf, Adam. I appreciate
No,
it.
next
for sure.
next time we'll come on. I'll ask you more questions about technique, because I love technical stuff. I'm always interested in it, and I'm interested in the common denominators. I've actually got I've got a series on my membership site at the moment looking at the technical musts, I call it, or the mechanical musts. So I'm interested in the same stuff that you guys are.
No, that's awesome. That's just one of our biggest strengths is the amount of golfers we have.
Yeah,
that'll never be replicated, at least anytime soon, by just a single guy on the driving range. It's just tough to do. So even the scientists and the people who really want to be thinking outside the box, whether it's kinetically or just want to be science people, they still struggle with a data set. So we can get thousands of people through our tests and systems in a couple days. So I'm trying to just find the separators of skill, like what you're doing too. And then I've got a brand new and more complicated and cool way of doing it. So that'll be our next rendition of skill separators.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Look forward to your book.
Well, thanks, guys. We will we'll see everybody back here tomorrow.
Deal. Thanks, Gordy. Thanks, Adam.